a Cold Lantern Cove production.
Nina hummed a cheerful tune as she repotted a particularly stubborn fern, its roots a tangled mess of brown and green. She worked carefully, coaxing the tangled strands apart, her fingers dusted with soil. Sunlight streamed through the bay window, illuminating the dust motes that swirled lazily in the air of her cozy apartment. The warmth of the afternoon and the quiet rhythm of her work wrapped around her like a comforting blanket. She loved these moments, where the outside world faded away, leaving only the simple pleasure of nurturing something green and alive. But just as she settled into that sense of peace, a sharp rap on the door shattered it. She froze, soil still clinging to her fingertips. The knock came again, more insistent this time, and an uneasy flutter stirred in her chest. Wiping her hands on a rag, she crossed the small space hesitantly and cracked open the door. Two men stood on her doorstep, their presence immediately jarring. They were dressed identically in long, dark trench coats, their short-brimmed hats casting shadows over their faces. Yet despite the obscured features, their eyes were piercing, sharp, calculated, and far too observant. Nina's fingers tightened on the doorknob. The taller of the two spoke first, his voice low and gravelly, the kind that seemed to carry weight even in its quietness. "Good afternoon, ma'am. We're conducting a survey about unusual celestial activity. Have you, by any chance, noticed any unusual lights in the night sky recently?" The question made her breath hitch. She had seen the lights, strange, pulsating glows that moved erratically across the heavens, unlike any aircraft she had ever known. But something about these men, about the way they stood, about the measured way they watched her, made her skin prickle. The words felt less like a simple survey and more like an interrogation. Her mind raced for an answer that wouldn't invite more questions. I usually stay up late, but I don't really pay much attention to the sky," she muttered, forcing a casual shrug. A moment of silence stretched between them before the men exchanged a brief, almost imperceptible glance. Then, just as abruptly as they had arrived, they turned and left, their coats swaying with their movements. Nina lingered at the doorway, her pulse thrumming in her ears, unable to shake the feeling that their visit was no coincidence. Even after she closed the door, the uneasy prickling at the back of her neck remained. Over the next week, the men returned twice more. Each time, their presence felt heavier, their questions more probing. At first, they simply repeated their inquiry about the lights, as if expecting her story to change. But by the second visit, their tone had hardened, losing any pretense of casual interest. Their sharp eyes seemed to bore into her, searching for something unspoken. Nina kept her answers brief, unwilling to reveal too much. But no matter how carefully she chose her words, their expressions remained unreadable, as if they already knew the truth. Each encounter left her shaken, her sense of safety eroding bit by bit. She found herself double-checking the locks on her door and avoiding her windows, afraid she might catch a glimpse of those dark coats lurking just beyond her view. Yet, despite her fear, the men always left without incident. No threats, no warnings, just an eerie silence that unsettled her more than words ever could. Desperate for reassurance, she confided in her closest friends, Sarah and Mark, describing the strange men and their unsettling persistence. Sarah, ever the pragmatist, suggested calling the police, but Nina hesitated, the idea sending a shiver of dread down her spine. Something about these men felt untouchable, as if they operated outside the bounds of normal authority. Would the police even take her seriously? And if they did, would it make things worse? Mark, usually the skeptic, admitted the whole situation felt off, but he dismissed her worries as paranoia, insisting that strange lights in the sky weren't worth losing sleep over. Still, Nina couldn't shake the feeling that something much bigger was happening, something just beyond her understanding. She stopped mentioning the visits after that, afraid of sounding irrational, but the weight of her unease only grew heavier. At night, the lights in the sky became impossible to ignore. They weren't just unusual anymore, they were captivating. A part of her resisted their pull, but each night, she found herself staring out the window longer than before, her pulse slowing, her mind quieting in a way that felt unnatural. The glow pulsed with a rhythm that seemed almost deliberate, as if calling to her. She told herself it was just a coincidence, just a strange celestial phenomenon that would pass in time. But deep down, she knew better. The last time the men came, they didn't bother with questions. They simply stood there, watching her. No clipboard, no fake pretense of a survey, just silent observation. The moment stretched unbearably, their presence oppressive, their expressions obscured by the brim of their hats. Then, as suddenly as they had arrived, they turned and left. That was the last time Nina saw them. That was the last time she spoke to anyone at all. The following Monday, Sarah and Mark grew uneasy when their calls to Nina went unanswered. At first, they brushed it off. Maybe she was busy, maybe she just needed some time to herself. But as the hours stretched on, a gnawing worry took hold. Nina wasn't the type to ignore messages, let alone disappear without a word. By evening, concern gave way to action, and they drove to her apartment, exchanging anxious glances as they knocked on her door. When no response came, Mark tried the handle and felt his stomach drop. The door was unlocked. Cautiously, they stepped inside, calling her name into the eerie silence. Everything inside was just as she had left it. The cozy apartment showed no signs of struggle, no overturned furniture, no broken glass, nothing that would suggest a sudden departure. The fern she had been repotting still sat on the windowsill, its roots half buried in the soil, as if she had stepped away mid-task and never returned. Her phone rested on the coffee table, untouched, along with her keys and wallet. But one thing stood out, sending a fresh wave of unease through them. A small telescope had been set up near the window, its lens carefully positioned toward the night sky. Neither Sarah nor Mark remembered Nina ever mentioning an interest in astronomy. The sight of it, so deliberately placed, felt wrong, as if she had been waiting for something. The air carried a strange charge, and as Sarah inhaled, she noticed it, an almost imperceptible scent of ozone, sharp and metallic, like the air before a thunderstorm. The police arrived soon after, but their search yielded little. No forced entry, no fingerprints beyond Nina's own, no trace of a struggle. She had simply vanished, leaving behind no evidence to explain how or why. The investigation quickly stalled, becoming just another cold case. Officials suggested she had run away, though Sarah and Mark both knew how absurd that theory was. Others whispered about the lights in the sky, but such speculation was dismissed as wild conspiracy. Yet Sarah and Mark couldn't shake what they knew. Nina had been afraid. She had spoken of the men in trench coats, their piercing eyes, their relentless questions about the celestial phenomenon. And she had watched those lights, night after night, drawn to them in a way neither of them understood. Now, all that remained of her was an abandoned telescope, a half-repotted fern, and a lingering, unsettling certainty that something far beyond their comprehension had taken her. Please don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos like this one. It will help the channel grow and allow us to keep making videos. Thank you.